I'll be introducing Ken Mal, who's with he's the CEO and co-founder of CXO Nexus. Ken and I go back a ways. Ken hails from New York City. I know he's a avid runner. I think Ken's about to compete in a, I think it's a marathon if I'm not mistaken. He founded CXO Nexus in 2017 after working in this industry and seeing firsthand some of the data problems that existed. Ken founded the peer-based research company, the Info Pro, in 2002, which was subsequently acquired by S&P Market Intelligence. Ken's had positions with Gartner, Apptio, Juniper, and others. And Ken, before we jump into your content, I'm going to give you a second to think about this, but what 2 or 3 apps on your phone, right now, if you couldn't live without them, what would they be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think, having children, my daughter, my wife, the texting, that's a big one. My email, because live by that, obviously, we have a lot on there. And I think, the browser, because doing the, go to the different websites, check the scores, check the Wall Street Journal. So probably those would be the 3 I use the most, I'd say.
All right, yeah, you're like me then. So, and yeah, we're going to talk about let's talk about optimizing vendor spend via AI and machine learning. Thank you again for participating and speaking with us. But take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Great to be here. Really appreciate the support. Great getting to know you and the team, Shane, and over the last several years. So again, as Kevin teed up, going to talk to you today about how AI and machine learning can really be used in a very effective way to optimize vendor spend, particularly through automation. Because if you think of what automation brings, no FTEs, no consultants, really allows teams to get at the data to take action on it. So that's really critical. So just to tee things up, so as Kevin mentioned, I've been in the industry for a long time, started my career working for EMC back in the 80s. So I've kind of seen this issue for a long time, and the issue being really understanding what you're spending with your vendors, because ultimately to optimize your spend, you need to really be in depth in understanding what your vendor true spend is. And we've trademarked true spend, and we'll get into examples of true spend over the next 20-25 minutes. I am ex-Gartner, as Kevin mentioned, and I think Gartner did a nice job about a year plus ago laying out their strategic roadmap for cost optimization for the CIO. And I highlight this because, as we discussed today, I think there's AI, machine learning, and automation bring that allow companies to achieve the optimization. And critical is establishing the baseline. Again, you heard from Flexera, there's so much volume out there. I mean, I'm sure the heads are nodding here. Huge amount of transactions, a lot of purchasing. Tech has expanded so much, the last 15, 20, 25 years. So being able to get that baseline, understanding what your spend is critical. And that's really, as you'll learn and you'll see today, and I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing this, that's where analytics and automation can really come into play. You need to know the baseline, understand where you're coming from, and then from there, the opportunities present themselves. And that's a key thing as well. You see by understanding your true spend with your OEM, your software publisher, your service provider. You also see that by understanding how your spend's categorized and classified. And that's a key thing that automation and AI and machine learning bring. And then from there, the implementation presents itself. We have clients and companies that are doing the implementation themselves. The data speaks for itself. They collaborate with the different stakeholders in IT and finance, procurement, to work on implementation strategies, to attain the quick wins, to get the optimization. There are partners we have and third parties out there that can help with the implementation as well. So there's really depends on how companies want to do that. And at the end of the day, it's important for the last 2 steps to institutionalize and to monitor and improve. It can't be a point in time exercise. We see that a lot with companies where they put some people on it, they'll bring in consultants, they'll try and establish that baseline. Oftentimes it's error prone, it's not the true baseline, and it doesn't scale, it's not repeatable. So institutionalizing this to be able to track how's my spend changing month over month, quarter over quarter, by vendor, by category is critical. And then that allows you to monitor and improve your continued improvement towards optimization and being able to monitor your steps. Hey, I consolidated vendors here, I consolidated suppliers there. Let me see the impact it's having on reducing my category or my spend with the OEM, software publisher, or service provider. So I think there'll be a lot of heads nodding as I go through the challenges, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just kind of like table set. And you can see to the right here some of the companies that are leveraging our SaaS solution, which is called CIO Insight, that I'll be kind of running through today for you. But at the end of the day, as I was kind of going over the previous slide with the Gartner 5 steps for optimization, visibility is always a challenge. What am I, if you talk to, a CIO, CFO of IT, IT leaders, procurement, finance leaders, who are your top 20, 25 vendors? What do you spend with them? What's it broken out by quarter, by year, by product, by category they play in? Really hard to do, and that's a big challenge with IT vendor spend. Parentage is also a big challenge. As you know, a lot of these companies are continuing to acquire. They're making acquisitions. So what's my true spend with a company that's made several acquisitions over the past few years? Whether it's a Salesforce, a Microsoft, an SAP, an HPE, a Cisco, that's a big challenge to understand your parentage. Categorizing the spend and classifying it, this is a key way optimization is leveraged, because you can see spend to a specific category, and that helps identify redundancies. Hey, where do I maybe have overlapping functionality, overlapping technology? That's a great way to help with the, being able to do that is hard, because classifying spend is not easy, but being able to have that automated out of the box really helps identify where optimization can come into play, and helps you monitor the moves you might be doing to see the impact. Did I reduce my number of vendors accordingly in a category based on initiatives I did, which we'll show some examples of. Redundant purchasing always happens, it's inevitable. Kind of relates to the next bullet with shadow IT or business-led spend. That often is the driver for redundant purchasing. The business unit, a line of business is buying the same thing, whether it's software or different types of gear that is being purchased centrally. When you're able to consolidate, you're going to get better leverage and also reduce risk, because we all know with highly regulated industries, and even if you're not highly regulated, shadow IT, unmanaged spend is an increase in risk, having that outside of central IT and the policies. Work done in silos is a big thing. We see a lot that automation and AI and machine learning can help with. And by that, I mean, we'll see IT, we'll see finance, we'll see the procurement teams kind of trying to do this. Oftentimes it's manual. It's, putting people on it or consultants to try and understand your spend with your top vendors, your categorization. But oftentimes it's not the best use of time to do that when you're working in silos. And then a lot of time gets spent trying to reconcile it. And usually it's out of date very quickly because it's not scalable, it's not repeatable. And lastly, if you look at the existing financial systems, they're really not designed to do this. Existing financial systems are not designed to give you that deep level of spend by category within IT. They're not designed to give you OEM, software, OEM, your software publisher, your service provider, your OEM true spend. What you're buying direct, what you're buying indirect through, let's say, a reseller or partner. That's not going to come from the existing financial system, and that's oftentimes the data source companies are using, and that's a liability and that's a challenge. And matter of fact, we have financial systems companies like an SAP that partner with us because they realize that we kind of make their data usable and actionable and pick up where their inherent systems leave off, whether it's their ERP, their procure to pay, type systems. So we've lived this. I gave you my background a little bit, and Kevin kind of teed up kind of where I come from in the industry, working with enterprises throughout my career and seeing this issue. But here's a few members of our team, our leadership team, that have actually been hands-on with the challenges. We call them their challengers. So Vince Satoro runs our global integration. Vince was CFO of IT at JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. Vince always likes to say one of the biggest things he feared the most was when people came into his office or asked him, hey, what do we spend with this vendor? Or who are our top 10 vendors? Or who is our top 5 vendors in this category? Really hard to do. It was often a manual exercise, and he knew that it was maybe not the most complete data because of what we were talking about earlier, the visibility and how you're buying direct and indirect. Sebastian Masclay is our Chief Product Officer. Sebastian built and ran the global TBM at Hearst, and Sebastian also brings experience with benchmarking. He was the benchmarking lead at ISG, and as we'll talk about, benchmarking is a really good outcome of leveraging a platform like CIO Insight to be able to benchmark your spend against a peer group. And then Leif Easterson brings the procurement perspective. Leif was global IT procurement lead at Citi. So again, a lot of purchasing globally, and a lot of he's lived this as a challenger. So want to show you some examples, and we're going to now be giving examples of both the Insight Analyzer and Insight Visualizer. That's our our flagship solution, CIO Insight. There's two flavors of it. When you go into it, it's SaaS delivery. There's Analyzer and Visualizer. So here's a view of Analyzer that I think does a good job highlighting some of the challenges we talked about in the previous slide. So if you can see a Cisco spend with the accounts payable is at 7.6 million. So that's when you're querying AP data, and this is we bring in all vendor spend inside our Insight platform, so you can kind of query all your vendor spend, and then you can query it by the OEM, software publisher, service provider. But if you were just look at AP data for Cisco, you'll see 7.6 million, and this is actual data based off of clients of ours that we've anonymized and brought into our Analyzer and Visualizer platform. But when you look at vendor true spend, which again is what we've trademarked as the true spend, you can see that spend is almost more than five times that. It's $44 million. And why is that? Well, we're going to get into that, but part of it is parentage. Cisco owns multiple companies that you're not going to pick up unless you know to query your AP data for that. And then also part of it is you're buying a lot of Cisco gear is being bought indirect. It's being bought through resellers, or it's being bought through being bought through a partner. So you're not going to find that in AP. You're not going to understand, hey, that partner-led spend, it's not easy to go at via querying the AP data. That's where you really need AI and machine learning to interrogate your spend, be able to build from the product level detail and show you what is happening with your OEM, software publishers, and service providers. Just another quick example. I know this might be a little small font, but again, this is just some things that I think will resonate, highlighting the challenges. IBM is one we hear about a lot with this. If you're to query AP, you're going to see IBM, International Business Machine, I.B.M. You're going to see subsidiaries. They own Red Hat. They own other companies, obviously, but you have to know to query AP and know how to query it to find all this to get your true spend with IBM. Same thing with the Cisco, with acquisitions they've made. You can see a lot of purchasing through partners for both a Cisco and a Dell. So again, it just highlights the challenges with understanding your true spend with your vendors. It's the AP data, which your probably teams and consultants are going to go after. You have to know where to look there, and it's oftentimes very manual to try and go through all of these different line items and be able to understand. Well, let's see that CDW purchase. What did I buy? Was it HPE? Was it Cisco? Was it Dell? Because oftentimes you're going to see multiple vendors inside that one order. That's really hard to do manually to come up with what your true spend is. So again, these are the challenges. Our teams lived it, we've lived it, and the AI and machine learning model we have is purpose-built to solve it. So kind of finishing the Cisco discussion earlier, because we showed you the accounts payable versus the true spend. This is another view within our analyzer, and this is, you can see along the bottom here, these are all the out-of-the-box reporting that comes with our analyzer within Insight and within the analyzer platform. So here we're looking at the reseller true spend, and this is the driver, for that Cisco. Some of it is parentage. There's a bit of Meraki and a bit of AppDynamics. You can see down at the bottom, but the bulk of it is purchasing that's being done through multiple partners, multiple resellers, and that is the challenge. Being able to go through that and understand what exactly it is hard to do manually, hard to do kind of with a homegrown solution. This is where the AI machine learning models really click in to automate that. And now you can see with one click, you can click on Cisco, you can see the different partners, and then from here you can click to see what the actual transactions were and the products were that you were buying. So again, this is all out of the box, and now you know your true spend, what's direct and what's indirect through a click within the Insight. So that's oftentimes the biggest aha moment we have with clients, and that obfuscation of direct and indirect is a big pain point companies have that we solve with the AI machine learning. And it's a great use case for AI machine learning. Why it is a great use case for AI machine learning, it really gets into what we do with the Nexus automation engine. So, we're agnostic. We'll work with any financial system, as I mentioned. We work with Workday, SAP, Oracle, Coupa. It doesn't matter. We're agnostic. We can bring in data from any system, but it's the AI and machine learning in the middle here, the combination of NLP, supervised and unsupervised machine learning that's interrogating all of that financial data and then giving you analytics to drive action. So we're automating that cleansing, classification, and categorization of the spend. Good to point out too on the left is we are agnostic, as I mentioned, and oftentimes we're bringing in multiple systems. So we have clients, whether it's through M&A or through just organically over the years, they're not on a unified financial system, that doesn't bother us. We can bring in multiple systems from a client. We can bring in an SAP system from one division, an Oracle system from another division. Our engine can bring in those separate feeds of the data, apply our AI and machine learning to it, and then give that holistic view of the spend, and then also be able to break the spend out by division or by cost center or by different permutations that a client might want to see. So a nice way, if you think M&A is a good use case, but just in general for companies to not have to worry about being in one spot, one system with the data, we can bring in data from any system, and we bring in a lot of different types of data. So you can see AP, purchase order, purchase rec type data, ERP data as well for cost centers. So now, kind of with that as a background, I want to jump into a couple of vignettes and examples so you can actually see how kind of insight in action and where we've been able to help drive optimization. This is the categorization. So I mentioned this is a key thing that companies struggle with, is being able to categorize their spend. And again, our AI and ML builds from that product level detail and categorizes spend to what's called the TBM taxonomy. So we standardized to the TBM taxonomy. It's 13 different categories. And in our Insight Visualizer here, this is kind of the views. So you can see application, compute, data center, network, you can see security. And in our model, based on clients, they've asked us to have red or colors that are trending red to be spends trending higher, and then green or colors that kind of trend towards green to be where spends trending lower. So in this case, for this view, we're not seeing any spend trending lower. Here's a case where spend's increasing kind of across the board with the different categories. And again, what you can see here is the category view, and then very easy right from here, which I'll show you, to then double click into the drill downs. So now here's the roll up by category, so you can see the different category spend. And then we got the term, double click's a term obviously that's well known, but we were chosen by a Walmart-led program last year to be part of an AI machine learning program that they led, and they certainly like the term double click there, so we use it a lot now. So they like that you can double click on security and compliance, and then from here you can go into that OEM spend, who the parent OEMs are, and the OEMs for that security category. So you can see, you start with the category, you can click on the category, go into the vendors that are making up that spend within the category. And this was a real use case for a client because, as we all know, security spend's been growing unabated. I know it was discussed in the Flexera presentation earlier, but I've been studying the security market through my own research company since 2001, 2002. We never saw security spend decline. Even in the nuclear winter of 08, 09, security spend was still spend that increased, and rightfully so. It's an area that you need to invest in. Companies need to make sure with all the cyber, and it's well documented, all the issues. The challenge with that, and it's not only the security issue, we see it in categories like storage, we see it in compute, certainly we see it in the application category, is you get sprawl, you get overlapping functionality, you get bringing in vendors that are kind of repetitive with vendor that you might have brought in 2 or 3 years ago. And this example we point out here for this client was related to firewalls. So if you look here, F5, Palo Alto, a Cisco, you can see a FireEye, a Barracuda. They realized, and this is where they got together with the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, and their team to look at this spend and say, well, gee, there is overlapping functionality. And it was a bit of an aha moment to realize that, and then when they dug into it, that there was overlapping functionality, specifically with firewalls. And again, from a double click perspective, here you're seeing all of the OEMs, and this is the roll up. It's the combination of what's direct and what's indirect through a partner. So we give you the overall OEM spend here in this view. And then here, from a double click perspective, you can drill down into the visualizer to be able to see the actual transaction. So you can see here, we've highlighted in the rectangle here in red, the breadcrumb or the trail of the purchase. It starts with the category, who's the parent OEM, the supplier, and then the actual transactions. So again, this is all data we've ingested through bringing in data from the financial systems, and then our AI and ML has automated that cleansing, classification, and categorization of the spend. So by double clicking on Cisco for security specifically, the client's able to go in and see the different firepower firewalls that were being purchased, how they were buying them, and prices paid. So by being able to do this exercise across those different vendors that have firewalls, it can clear the redundancies, and the client leveraged this to consolidate from 6 firewalls down to 2, and it was a very significant savings very quickly through that consolidation. So those are the kind of examples you see with Insight, and this is a specific one of security, but as I mentioned earlier, You'll see this within the application category. You'll see within storage with things like all flash arrays or backup software, a lot of redundancies there. You'll see it in compute with overlapping with blade servers, hyperconverged infrastructure. We're seeing a lot of overlaps with multiple hyperconverged infrastructures being implemented in organizations now. So having this visibility, very intuitive, as you can see, gets everybody collaborating, kind of working off of that single source of truth and identifying those quick wins. So tying in with Gartner, the Gartner piece on the optimization, the baseline's there, and identifying the opportunities comes to the fore very intuitively by having the spend all centrally in a very intuitive fashion. Cost center is another view that is important that we touched on earlier with the shadow or the business-led spend. Certainly, a challenge we see with a lot of companies we work with, and we all know that it's happening. But by bringing in GL data and being able to tie in cost centers with where the spend's happening, again, this is an out-of-the-box view within the analyzer, the cost center true spend, and this has been very effective for clients to understand where spend's happening outside of IT, and then also understand where there might be overlapping purchases or redundant purchasing. We'll see with things like analytics, we'll see it with certain end user devices. So it's a good way to reduce risk because you don't have the BUs doing their spend, particularly for things like applications that could have sensitive spend, as well as optimization, because now you can be centralizing that purchasing and getting better leverage because you're not having individual contracts or individual relationships. You can centralize your buying power by understanding the type of spend that's happening outside of IT. And it's often very significant, which adds to the leverage points. But when you see millions of spend happening that's business led, it's a great way to get that spend centralized and be able to optimize and get the leverage points. So again, similar to what I showed earlier, I can't go through all the different double clicks, but you can double click down here into the specific applications that are being purchased, how you're buying them. Again, it's all very intuitive to drill deep into, like the breadcrumb I showed you earlier. OEM, the OEM parent, the OEM, the supplier, how it's being bought, down to the product level detail. That's all an exercise in double clicking within both Analyzer and Visualizer. And then one last view to show is the True Spend dashboard. So this is kind of the launching pad within Analyzer, and I think it does a good job kind of giving you kind of the overall functionality, but also how you can launch into a lot of different views from this. Key to point out on the top left is, and I kind of touched on this earlier when I was going over our Nexus automation engine, is we bring in all vendor spend. So we're purpose built with our AI and ML to automate the cleansing, classification, and categorization of the IT spend. But what's key is that we bring in all the vendor spend because I just showed you, that's how we're able to identify the business-led spend. That's where we're able to understand what's happening outside of central IT. So we bring in all the vendor spend. And then from there, we can show you the transactions. You can look at the volumes. Then you can see of that overall vendor spend, what percentage is IT. And as you know, with indirect spend, IT is usually number 1 or number 2 in terms of the volumes. So you can see the total spend there, what's done through the resellers, the transactions. So this is kind of the overview of what's happening within the environment for the company. And then you can see you're very intuitive to look at the total technology spend, the stack ranking, high to low, the categorization, which we've talked about. And again, this is all things you can double click. You can double click an application, see all your application providers, how you're buying. You can see compute, storage, data center, network, security we highlighted earlier. So again, you have your top vendors at your fingertips here. You can drill into the specifics of the OEM parentage. You can drill into the specifics of how it's being bought, direct and indirect. And then you can see also in this view, the resellers and the top OEMs purchased through resellers. So this is a nice view to kind of give you it's the launching pad, but it's also a good summary to show all the different functionality. And from here, you can jump into a category or a specific OEM or reseller to understand all that you're buying and how you're purchasing. And again, along the bottom here is all of the out-of-the-box functionality, all the out-of-the-box reporting and analytics that are come within the analyzer. I know I'm getting close to the top of the hour, just a couple quick endpoints. So we started with the Gartner piece. And again, hopefully what you've seen over the last 20, 25 minutes is how AI and machine learning, the Insight platform really is purpose built for establishing that baseline, which is critical. And, this is what I've just seen throughout my career. And I was really excited to build a company that leverages automation to establish this baseline. So no FTEs, no consultants needed. It's all automated. You've got the baseline. You saw how we identified opportunities with that security example with firewalls, and also with Cisco, identified opportunities to consolidate suppliers because so many different suppliers were being used to purchase Cisco gear. So that's how you can implement, and then it's institutionalized. Companies refresh with us on a monthly basis. So every month over month, they're able to track the changes, and then that's their ability to monitor and improve. So it's all automated out of the box, and it's all AI and machine learning purpose built to solve the challenges and the issues. I've kind of touched on this, and I think this is my last actual slide, but we really, as I mentioned earlier, with that work done in silos, what we find is this is that centralized view that has IT, procurement, and sourcing all working off of that single pane of glass. Nice quote here from Sean Bennett from Paramount on the use cases here, how automating the visibility and what it's brought to his organization, and getting the stakeholders across IT, finance, and procurement all working together and collaborating. But again, negotiating leverage, consolidation of both OEMs, software publishers, service providers, supplier reduction, being able to eliminate tail spend is a key use case, and that collaboration across the BUs is critical. And then lastly, certainly I know we went through things quickly, and those were screenshots. More than happy to give a run through live of what CIO Insight looks like, to show how it's all double clicking and what you can get the functionality. And again, a nice quote from Jim Dinan, the global technology CFO at NASDAQ, of how they've been able to see Insight to be a real strong use case for dollar saves through optimization and cost avoidance.
Fantastic, Ken. Thank you very much. Hey, I wish I knew you 10 years ago, because this was my exact problem working for a very large telecom company here in the Dallas area. Our ITAM stakeholder wanted to do exactly this, right? Pull across their different financial systems what their true spend was, and it was exceptionally manual. I was a consultant, so it worked out for me, but it was a very tedious and arduous exercise. So I wish I had known you a decade ago.
Well, we were founded in 2017, so we were living this pain. You can see our team and myself, and that's why we're here now to solve it. But yeah, no, it's and you probably found too, it was a point in time exercise, right? It was like, try and do it manually, but can that scale? Is it repeatable? And that's the beauty of the automation, is companies are refreshing monthly, and it takes a matter of days. We bring in data usually the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th of the month. We get automated feeds in from our clients, and within a matter of days, their instance of Insight is refreshed based on the previous month's data. Yeah,
you hit it exactly. Our big problem was two things. One, it was an Excel-driven exercise, so it was very stale after you left. But two, getting underneath that reseller line item was really, really difficult for companies that spend a lot of money with multiple resellers and are just really large. This problem just gets really, really ugly quickly. So
that's one of our biggest drivers.
Yeah,
that's one of our biggest drivers, Kevin, is the reseller.
Yeah, absolutely. But I thought this was a good presentation, especially for some of our procurement folks who are on the call. But just, Ken, quick question for you. Talk a little bit about the benchmarking use case with Insight. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, Sebastian Masclay, our Chief Product Officer, has a great benchmarking background. I was involved in benchmarking at Gartner, and when I ran benchmarking and data at Apptio. Key thing with benchmarking, just real quick, there's a couple flavors of it. It's, if you think of the way we categorize to the standard taxonomy, companies can benchmark their spend against a peer group by category. So how does my spend compare for, let's say, application or storage or compute compared to a peer group, compared to a cohort? Very effective to be able to understand that. Certain verticals really like that, like financial services is a big one, insurance, oil and gas. So be able to benchmark by category and the makeup of vendors in a category. So what's my spend by category? How many vendors am I using? How does that compare to a peer group? Really good data to be able to have. The other thing that's interesting with the benchmarks is what we're doing with clients is internal price benchmarking. Hey, let's look at different configurations. Maybe it's routers, maybe it's all-flash arrays, maybe it's blade servers, and understand where you're getting the best pricing internally, because you, as mentioned earlier, through resellers, you might be buying through multiple stakeholders, multiple suppliers. So being able to understand and do internal price benchmarking is another form of the benchmarks we see as well. That's a great question.
Awesome, and we've had a question come in from the audience. This looks great. How much effort is it to provide the data and configure the system?
Great question. So Vince Totoro, I showed him earlier as one of our challengers. He was the CFO of IT at Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan. Vince and his team runs the integration. We have a manifest that's straightforward in terms of the data we want to ingest, and Vince and the team iterate typically with a designated person within finance and sourcing and procurement to get that data. And then what it becomes is an automated feed. So we work on the data, we iterate. It usually takes, it can take less than a week. It can take a few weeks of iteration to get to look at the data, make sure it fits the profiles of what we want, and that it's the data we want to ingest. And then that data feed becomes an automated, not dating myself, but I do remember I grew up in the mainframe days, and mainframes still out there. It becomes a cron job. So what companies do is, as I was mentioning, like 3rd, 4th, 5th of the month, an automated feed is sent securely into CXO Nexus, into Insight, for us to then refresh the instance. So that is the most work. So it's a good question, Heather. That is the most work. That is where a client needs to put resources on the data up front, and then it becomes automated over to us. But if that person wants to follow up, we can get them the manifest and then schedule some time to kind of walk them through the data and the different ways we're bringing it in. And as I mentioned, we like to bring in multiple sources. So we can bring in the procurement data, we can bring in AP data, sometimes we'll bring in invoice data, and then our AI and ML does the reconciliation and normalization on the back end. So we make that all kind of fit into then what's that singular transaction, and then how it builds up to category and OEM.
Perfect. And Kevin, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right. Once again, thank you, Ken. Great job as always, and I look forward to seeing you catching up soon in person.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes.